Good afternoon. I'm Shanice. Before we get started, I do want to start off with an icebreaker question. So,
Okay.
Carlos,
Okay.
if you could live in any sitcom on TV's past or present, which one would it be and why? And what character would you be?
Oh wow, that's a lot of thinking right now. Let me think. Um,
Take your time.
I would I would probably say uh, one sitcom that I absolutely love. I'm gonna be honest with you was Living Single. And I wrote something about that. But anyway, Living Single was like just amazing show because you had such diversity and they lived in New York and they were friends and they had people that friends that stayed down the street and then in the building. So I really love that show because they were all professional and the camaraderie they had as friends. I remember those days when you were in college, you had friends, all just down the hall in your dorm room. So I always, go back to that, not having to really not do anything, even though they had jobs. It seemed like they didn't do anything. But I like the fact that they always had this. Let's go out to eat and let's hang out and let's go through sift through life together as a family. So living single, real simple.
Awesome. That was a very classic comedy,
Yeah.
realistic reality show. And
hmm
also, so can you tell us more about yourself and what you do for the people that's
Oh my
unfamiliar?
God, I do a lot, but primarily now I'm writing. Like I am like hard at work at writing sci-fi. I love anything non-reality based. Most of my material and books are like they have a hint of reality, but at the same time they have this sci-fi type edge to it. And I think that's very important to live outside yourself and not always be in your reality, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Of course, sometimes we need to escape our reality sometimes. So that's
Yeah.
awesome, which brings me to my next question. What author of your genre, which is sci-fi, inspires you the most and why?
uh, to be honest with you, it's probably going to be surprising to you or your viewers, but I absolutely love Stephen King. Okay, I've read every one of his books, and he's like um, the author that really gets me going because his imagination is so vivid and in depth that you really have to get like when you're reading his books, you're inside of his demented, creative, innovative mind. And that's why I always say that Stephen King is one of the greatest writers on the planet. I love how he just pivots with his stories, and you don't think they're going to be a certain way, and they end up being something else, and then he veers to the left, and he turns you around, and it's just so much intrigue around his books and his writing, and I just love it. And plus, most of his books were turned into movies, which gave you a visual, you know. So that's why I think Stephen King is one of my favorite, if not my favorite writers.
I would have to agree myself. Okay.
Yeah.
And also, I do
Yeah.
want to ask you, Carlos, when did you discover that you loved writing and wanted to pursue a career as an author?
Okay, so being okay, I'm one of 8 kids, so having that much, having that many kids in one household is like crazy because you're trying to find your identity. You're trying to figure out who you are as a person, and the kids kind of your brothers and sisters kind of force you to realize who you are because one is a great athlete, one is a great writer or reader, one is a great academic, scholar. Another one just loves to just, pilfer through, life. So you trying to you find your place in that, and also within that you have to have fun, right?
Right.
So what I would do, this is what I would do as the third oldest, I would create these games. Okay, I mean, anything you could possibly think of. You remember Double Dare? You may not remember Double Dare, but it was a show on Nickelodeon called Double Dare. I would create that. I would create like The Price is Right. I would create. I mean, I would be writing all of this stuff. Create sitcoms. I would just create and just write about it because I mean, I had like a whole team, a whole cast. So why not do that? So I would do plays. So with stuff that was going on in my family, for me, being able to inject some type of fun that involved role play, involved dramatics, whatever, acting, that kind of stabilized our household at the time. And writing all that, I began to realize as I moved into college, like, oh, I really love to write. I really love to create, to produce. So I began doing that in college. And that's a whole nother experience that involving in the arts that I it was a path that I ventured on because it was just so fun. And then college is different because your brothers and sisters, you have to make them be the actor. You have to make them want to do the play. You had to make them want to come into your world, the world that I was creating. I had to make them. But in college, everybody wanted to be in my world. So I would create my talk show. I created a TV show. I did a play. I did all these different things at colleges, and people wanted to do it. So I'm like, oh, wait a minute. And I love doing it. So that's why I stayed on that path of writing. And so far I've written 5 books. I'm working on my 6th book now. So, and of course I want to, those to be adapted into movies. So I'll have a creative a consulting kind of producing aspect of I want to be able to do that as well. So I'll still be able to get my characters on screen the way I want them to be. And I think for me, that's just it. I love creating like, false realities. I just do.
That's awesome, which we will get into. I have done my research, Carlos, and I know that you attended
Yeah.
Ferris University and you are from Flint,
Yeah.
Michigan.
I'm from Flint, Michigan. I mean, it's like, yeah, I mean, Flint is one of those places where it forced you to grow up, sort of like similar to a lot of the big cities like, Akron or Detroit, Newark. A lot of those cities, those rough urban cities, they force you to pick and choose on who you're going to be. And it's up to you to do that when it does, because it does, it comes for you. Like you can't run from it. It forces you. You're going to either go left or you're going to go right. And it's up to you to do that. And being from Flint, oh my God, at one point in time, it was the murder capital of the world. Let's just say that. And as a kid, I didn't know what that meant, but I knew the ideas of murder, capital of the world. That means most people who are going to be murdered are murdered in this city. And of course, being a kid, you don't see it, but it's all around you. I think my family kind of protected us from that narrative, but still, it's Flint, Michigan, still my city. Regardless, it's like I was saying earlier, creating a reality. You're in your own reality. You're creating what it is you want to create, and so that's what our family tried to do.
Right, that's great. And I do want to ask you, like, even though you studied film, production, television in college, and also upon doing my research, I did see that you worked behind the scenes for award-winning TV series Smallville. So what was that
Yeah,
like?
yeah. I mean, going from making little shows on campus and college to pivoting to uh, uh, working at Warner Brothers for those 5 years. It was the first year. I ain't gonna lie to you, it was like surreal. Like, what? There's Jennifer Aniston and there's George Clooney and there's this one and like it was surreal. Working and being on the lot, what they call it, or being on the set, the studio set. It was really, really surreal. And then after about 1 year, it wore off. You realize that, oh, okay, these are just regular people. They're driving, they're living their lives, and they're going to meetings, they're doing their thing. But I learned so much working on that show with a lot of the writers and the producers on the show. And I think that was the whole point of me being there, to be able to understand that I belong there, but I too can create compelling, stories that can help, you know, so social justice wise, or also, just in the realm of taking you out of your reality if you're in an impoverished situation, or a situation that could be, altering of your state of mind. So it just helped, that whole process working at that company just helped me. It nurtured my creative mindset. It nurtured how I perceived the world and what I wanted to see in the world that wasn't being shown. So for me, it was a great experience overall.
I'm glad to hear. I know that can be
Yeah.
hard. Like production is, it's a
Hmm.
lot. It's hard work. But I'm glad you got the benefits of being able to have such a creative mind behind it and wanted
Yeah.
to do more and inspire others.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Definitely.
That is
100%.
awesome. Okay, so I do want to ask you, can you share with us what is the importance of writing?
Uh, okay, yeah. I mean, that's an excellent question. And for most people, they think writing is just about creating something new, or a new story, a new idea. And sometimes for me, writing is therapeutic. Okay. And I always tell people, if you can journal, journal, because what you're doing is, because we have about thousands of thoughts that's running through our brains every single day, and we don't compartmentalize those thoughts. We just kind of just let them run rampant, and before you know, at the end of the day, you have all these colors in your mind. You're just like, what's, you don't know where to start. That's why people don't, start their business, or their or push for a better job or promotion, or you finish that book or whatever it is. It's because they have so much clutter in their brain. I'm be honest with you, so much clutter, and it stems from all these thoughts. So writing, to answer your question, Shell, writing is very, very therapeutic, because all you have to do, like when you journal, when you write about your day, when you write about what you want in your week, when you write about what you think you're going to be doing in a year, like all that stuff kind of propels that positive energy and that positive thoughts in your mind. It don't have to be that you're writing a book. It don't have to be that you're trying to start a magazine. It's just to the point where you are placing your thoughts to paper, so that you know what you're thinking. Because sometimes we don't even know what we're thinking, and sometimes we're prisoners of our own thoughts, because, and I'm not trying to make this self-help, but still, I'm just, just bear with me. Go with me.
I know.
But sometimes we're in our own heads and in our own thoughts, and we don't realize that we're self-sabotaging relationships, friendships, we don't know, because we're thinking one way, but we're meaning to do something else. And sometimes the reflection comes back to us, and we're not in a way accepting of that reflection, because we're not in control of our thoughts. So we just like, oh, I didn't mean that. Oh, I didn't think that. You know what I meant. You know what I'm thinking. Like, no, you have to place those on paper, so because sometimes you don't even know what you're thinking. You're just thinking and throwing out thoughts and energy, and you have to be able to place it on paper and say, oh, this is how I feel about my mom. This is how I feel about my coworkers. This is why that relationship didn't work. Once you start to do that, I'm not saying you got to write this big old book or anything, but you have to be able to have something that you can look at and say, oh, okay, this is my journey. This is where I'm going. Because it's like a map. And if you don't have it, it's like you're in some other country when you try to get to Vegas. No, look at the piece of paper, put your thoughts to paper, and go from there. It's really easy. I mean, they've been writing stories since the test of time. Since the beginning of time. Stories have always been written. People have been logging their journey and logging their life. So I just think it's really, really important to write down your thoughts. It's just so important.
I do
I'll
agree.
leave it at that.
It is very therapeutic to get it all down so it's not stuck in your head. It's out of sight,
Yes.
out of sight, out of mind. So that is
Yeah.
very important. Okay, so I want you to describe the experience of writing your first book. What was it?
Oh Lord. Okay, so let me I'm just gonna pivot back just a little bit.
Okay.
So looking at the landscape of books that was out when I first began to write, which was like 2000. When I first got here, 2000, I saw a lot of the narratives that didn't target my demographic. My friends. Everything was just a complete opposite of, people told us what we should see, what we should read, how we should dress. Like that's what society tells you. And I had a good friend of mine. He and I will always, we will always talk about, oh, wouldn't it be great if? Wouldn't it be nice if? Wouldn't it be wonderful if? It was always that question. I was like, why don't we just create what's lacking? And so my good friend at the time, we created this series. It's called Volonians, and we sat down because a lot of the kids, I'm be honest with you, a lot of kids was not reading, and a lot of I didn't come, like I said, I didn't come from a family that endured or encouraged reading. So, or education for that matter. It was just like, you do it, you don't, you don't. So being the only one to have gone to college, and I knew I was deemed something special, something different that I had to do. I was on a different trajectory or different path. I was just on something different. So when my friend and I, we got together, we began to come up with ideas for stories. And our biggest thing was superhero. That was our biggest thing, superhero stories, because superheroes, they told you, they help you resonate with how powerful you are, how vulnerable you can be, that critical thinking that you may have about yourself or others. They help you to nurture that. So we wrote our first series. It was called Volonians, and it's a part 1 and a part 2. We haven't written part 3 just yet, but it was part 1, part 2. And writing that was like, wow, because that was the first time I've ever written with someone. Okay, usually I would just write alone. And so I wrote with him, and we came up with this beautiful, just amazing story. I have a trailer to it. It's just great. It was just a great story about these twins from this planet we created called Valonia. And it was just something that had never been done or seen before. That's why when people talk about Black Panther now, I'm like, we did that like years ago, and we created, we created, that, because actually that book came out in 2000. Those books came out 2013, something like that. So we had already created that and done something similar to that. I would say similar. It was, but writing that was just amazing. Then I realized, oh my God, I really have to do this. Like I really have to put my heart and soul. And from there on, from 2013, 2012 when we started, I've been full throttle. I haven't stopped writing material since then. So that's where I am now.